Succession planning is Succession planning is one of the most overlooked yet most critical aspects of running a financial advisory business. For women-led firms, the stakes are even higher. With fewer women in the advisor pipeline, deep client relationships built on trust, and missions tied to values as much as revenues, finding the right successor can feel daunting. Today, our panel of experts will explore why traditional succession models often fall short, what steps you can take to protect your legacy, and how to ensure your clients and values are carried forward when you transition. So, again, thanks for being here. I'd love to introduce our panel. We have a great group today. First, Katie Burke. She's the president and founder of Method Financial Planning, and she's also the co-founder of Equita Financial Network. Next, Bridget Venus Grimes. She's the president of Wealth Choice and also the co-founder of Equita Financial Network. Brooklyn Brock. She's the founder of Elevate Advisors. Tiffany Lee, exit planner with Elevate Advisors, and Stuart Smith, who is a senior consultant with FP Transition. So welcome, everyone. Thank you guys for being here. And before I get into all of my questions, and I've got a lot of them, I want to let you know that we want to hear from you as well. If you have a question while the various panelists are talking or something pops into your head, please submit it in our Q&A feature, and we will get to as many questions as possible. But before, as I said, we get into the questions, I wanted to highlight a few interesting statistics that we put together over here on succession planning. According to a recent Kestra survey, 80% of successions fail. So why is that? Some of the top reasons cited include founders wait too long to plan. Sound familiar, right? Only 6% of advisors planning to retire in the next 10 years have a documented succession plan in place. Control challenges. Founders struggle to trust successors they don't know well, especially I think this is where some of the unique challenges from women come in. And lack of clear direction. If you don't have it written down, if you don't have a detailed roadmap, a lot of what-if scenarios, then the plan is going to probably fall short. Some additional data points include 91%, so this isn't just about you and your team, but 91% of clients said it's important that their advisor have a succession plan in place. 75% of advisors identify emotional aspects of transferring clients as a key challenge in succession planning. Also, according to Carson Wealth's Women in Wealth survey, 51% of respondents said they hadn't even begun thinking about succession planning, and women advisors and firm owners who do prioritize succession planning report greater confidence, career clarity, and long-term satisfaction. So if all of those reasons weren't enough, poor succession planning actually correlates with talent attrition. According to the Kestra survey cited before, 1 in 3 next-gen advisors would consider leaving their firm if there isn't a clear succession timeline in place, and 1 in 4 next-gen advisors would consider leaving their firm if there is no path to equity offered, and that is becoming more and more popular with the next generation of advisors. So just wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit with some, I think, staggering statistics for us to keep in mind as we go through our conversation today. So again, thank you panelists for your time today and for being here. My first question I'd like to direct to Bridget. Bridget, you own your own RIA, as I mentioned, Wealth Choice, and also co-founded Equita FN. From your experience as a female firm owner, why do you think it's critical for women to prioritize succession planning, and how have you handled this at your firm?
Yeah, and it's a really good question, and it's something we've been thinking a lot about. So, just a little bit of background. My story: I'm 61 and solopreneur, and you get to this point where you start to think about what's the future for my firm. And so, the succession plan, I really struggled with what is the solution here. So, I launched this firm 9 years ago, and I launched to serve clients the way I think that they are best served. I have a very specific niche. It's super important to me that we serve these women, breadwinner women, the way we thought was they were served best. So our clients are really important to me. And when I look at my firm, I feel like the client relationships are, they're non-negotiable, right? So any plan that I have with the legacy of my company has to be focused on what happens to my people, what happens to my clients. And then the other part that you're really concerned with is, well, what's my legacy? Because as a lot of the folks on this call would probably relate to, this firm that I built, this is a huge part of my life. This is a huge part of my identity. And it's not so easy to just have somebody say, well, here's the multiple, take your money and have a good day. So I really struggled with what's the vision for my firm? What's the role that I want to play in this? And what are my options? And then we set out to figure out, okay, what really are my options? And so I think as solo owners, and I think as women-led firms, a lot of us share these common challenges, right? We really care about our clients. We have a very strong affinity for our firm. And how do we get a solution? And I found that there's just not one size that fits all. And so for us, when I started to look at what my options were, I am fortunate in that I have a Gen Z daughter. And it was not always her intention to be part of this company. In fact, it was probably never her intention to be part of this company. But, as I looked at the future of my firm and I looked at my clients and my options, we had a conversation a few years ago. And so this is a woman who is 28 years old. And I think that's important, right? So I brought her into the firm. It's almost 2 years now. And so she will be part of my plan. But I'm not really sure still what that plan is. And I think that this is important because what we're going to be talking about is succession planning isn't something that you decide today and execute tomorrow. And so I'm still not sure what the vision is for my firm, but I know that we have someone in place. We're having these conversations. We're starting to think about what that future is, which I think also kind of begs this question about, is succession the right word for what we're doing? And so recently at Future Proof, and actually Suzanne, you moderated this panel that was fabulous, and one of Stuart's colleagues was on this panel as well. And he brought up the point that perhaps we should be looking at this not as succession planning, but as sustainability planning. And it kind of changed the way I was thinking of this, because I was struggling with, I have to have an out. Well, I don't want an out. For me personally, my out's going to look different than Katie's out, or anyone else's out. So it really is about, what is the vision that we all have as founders for our firms? What is that legacy? And what is going to allow us to have these firms be sustainable and successful and serving our clients, into the future?
Yeah, I think that's great. And it was Brad, the CEO of FP Transitions, and when he said we should be thinking about this as sustainability versus succession, that really does change the way that you think about this kind of a plan, because it could be an exit strategy, a transition, selling your practice, bringing in a partner. There are a million different options, as I'm sure Stuart and Brooklyn and Tiffany will get to when we get to that area of the discussion. But I think that is a really, really critical step. So thanks for sharing a little bit about your journey, and that the fact that you still don't have it all figured out either, right?
No, not yet.
It's gonna evolve. So Katie, you also own your own RIA, and you're dealing with a very personal experience that shows that it's never quite too early to be thinking about a sustainability plan. So can you share a little bit about your story?
Thank you, Suzanne. And I apologize to everyone. I'm losing my voice, but I'm going to get through this. So I appreciate everyone's patience. So I launched my firm Method Financial Planning a decade ago. So I was 33 years old. No thought in my mind about what planning for the next stage would be, succession planning. I was just focused on growth, like so many of us are. I knew succession planning was something in the future, but it wasn't urgent, right? It was not on my list. Everything changed for my family about 2 years ago. One Friday, I was on a ski trip with my two young sons and my husband, enjoying the ski mountain, making some great memories. And on Saturday, my husband was in the emergency room, admitted to the hospital, prepped for emergency brain surgery, and we found out that he had brain cancer. There was no warning, there was no time to plan for any of this personally or professionally. So as my world was crashing down, of course, my first priority was my husband, his health, my children, our finances, and just getting through each day minute by minute. So Monday, I remember I put my out of office on. That's how I could buy myself some time because I needed to figure out what my business, running that day to day was going to look like since now my time is taken up with my personal life. And it begs the question, I started to think about, well, what happens if I can't go back to work at all? What happens to my clients? What happens to my business if now my family and my husband need my attention full time? So, as financial planners, we're always speaking with our clients, whether they're business owners or a couple planning for retirement, about our what if scenarios, right? I think about an e-money, all those different things you can choose that might happen in your client's life for you to help plan for them so that they're taking some risk off the table and that they're ready if something expected happens. But how often do we take our own advice? How often do we plan a what if for our business or our personal life? What happens if something takes you away temporarily or permanently from your business and you don't have a plan? Because of my husband's illness, I'm in a lot of different support groups with other women whose husbands have glioblastoma. And I can't tell you how many times I see the story that a woman and her husband owned a business, or perhaps the woman owned a business. She was, the mid of like the height of her career. And when her husband's diagnosed, one of the first things that this woman does is fire sale of the business, quits her job, and it's because there's no options, right? There's no plan in place. And I am so glad that that didn't happen to me and that I had a way to continue to move forward in my business and not have to put my business up for sale. So here's part of my story that I think is a little bit more unexpected. Because of the community that I have through building Equita, because of my partnership with Bridget, I wasn't facing all of this alone. So I was able to put a plan, albeit a action plan that was thought of at the moment, but I was able to put it into place almost immediately. And I could then focus entirely on my husband and my family. So we have shared resources on the Equitop platform. I was able to increase the hours for my outsourced service team. They're my out of office and dealing with client tasks. My marketing team was dealing directly with compliance so that I was still getting all my correspondence out. Our trading team continued their work in my client account, so the trading was seamless. And one of the biggest things and things that means the most to me is that my fellow advisors, my fellow women that are part of this community, stepped up and said, Katie, whatever you need, if your clients need a new financial plan, something comes up, reach out to me. And that was, priceless. My business didn't fall apart, kept moving in the background. And that gave me the gift of time and space to focus on what mattered and decided what my next step with my business were going to be. As we mentioned, Bridget just brought up, when we think about succession planning traditionally, we think about putting the firm's value first, making sure the firm owners' financial interests are at the top of the list. But I want to challenge you to think about something else. If something happened to you, who would step in and take care of your clients? Who would run the team at your firm? So succession planning isn't all about, like Bridget said, retirement and exit planning. It's about building resilience and sustainability for your business. It's about protecting the people and the legacy that you've built, whether you're 35 years old or 65 years old. So even though I believe I have a lot of years left in my career, I understand personally the power of having a plan in place. It ensures that your clients are taken care of, your team knows what to do, and the value of your business doesn't disappear overnight. I never imagined this to be my story. None of us do. But my hope is that by sharing it inspires you to start to take action today before life forces you to.
Well, first and foremost, Katie, thank you so much for sharing that very personal story. And we could put together a million different slide decks with 50 million stats that support why you should do this, but I don't think anything is quite as powerful as what you just shared. So thank you. And I think it just also shows the testament to this community in the financial planning industry, right? People want to help other people. It's important to have a community. I think women, especially, are very community minded. And I'm glad to hear that you had the support system that you need and deserve. So, Bridget and Katie, in addition to having your own firms, you started Equita FN specifically for female owned independent REAs. So you speak with a lot of female advisors around succession planning, sustainability planning issues. And that comes up as quite an area of need. From your experience leading a network of these women led firms, why do you think succession planning presents unique challenges and opportunities for women advisors compared to the broader industry?
I think I would start with what Katie mentioned, which is finding people, your tribe, right? Finding other folks who share your values, and finding a successor, if you want to call it that, a sustainability partner, whatever you want to refer to that solution. I think it's really hard. And when we are talking to women, and we talk to women all the time, running their firms, sharing best practices, understanding their stories, just so we can help each other succeed. So many times people are what we hear is, hey, I'm out here running my firm. Maybe I have a small ensemble firm, but I'm out here doing our thing. And there is nobody else who looks like me. There is nobody who I could easily say, hey, this would be a great fit for my clients to join, as our successor, because there's just not a lot of commonality. So, Brooklyn knows this. We talked about this years ago when we were exploring emergency continuity planning, and people they would write down, okay, here's things really important to me. Here's values for me and my firm. And that's where it would end, because you just couldn't find other firms, other women who shared your values and your tech stack and your everything. And so it goes nowhere. So I really feel that a challenge for especially women founders, if you are looking for another woman or woman-led firm or series, if you're looking for more women, our pool is so tiny, right? I mean, there's not a lot of folks from which to choose for a succession. So you start with that, and then, how do you find folks of similar values and similar resources? And it becomes really challenging. So I think that is a huge issue, and I think it stops a lot of us in our tracks.
Agreed. Great points. Katie, what about you? What are some of the unique opportunities? You alluded to some of it in your answer before around this community and women-led communities, but what are some of the challenges and opportunities?
I think that like as Bridget said, when I got in this industry, 20 years ago, I never worked for a female advisor. I didn't see anyone out there doing what I wanted to do. And that challenge continues today. Not much has changed. That's kind of disheartening, but I hope that we're all here, right, to talk about how we can make that change. We place as women such a high value on our client relationships that I want to make sure that if something happens or somebody who's stepping into my role, that they're working with my clients the same way I am. So how do I bring that person in to really understand the intimacies of my relationships with my clients and how I want to, help them succeed, and all of those different pieces, the technology they're currently using, and what does that transition look like? So that's that mission and culture fit as well.
Yeah, I think that's huge. That's huge. So thank you for that. Now, let's bring Brooklyn and Tiffany into this conversation. Um, Working with advisors on succession plans, this is what you guys do every day at your firm. So, how do the values, alignment, and client relationships that Katie just alluded to shape succession decisions differently in women-led firms in your experience?
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. We see so many, we just have such a great opportunity to work with so many women. We look at the average number of female advisors that are out there. I think it's like in the mid 20s. And I think over 50% of our succession planning clients are female advisors. So we are so blessed and we enjoy the work so much getting to make a difference here. But we also get to talk with a lot of different women who are facing this challenge. And one of the things that we see is women have values and relationships, like Katie was just saying, but they see those things differently, um, to the extent of putting a weight and sometimes even a financial value, a financial monetary dollar amount assigned to a value or relationships being taken care of. And that is something that can be challenging. Like, how do you put a number on something that means the world to you? It can feel impossible, but it's something that Tiffany and I do. One of the exercises that we go through is we start listing out what are your emotions around the succession plan and what are your values as an individual that you bring to the table. And that sparks the conversation around what's important to you. And then we can figure out how to quantify those things. And those become the success criteria for the succession plan. So ultimately, I think women see the succession planning project as an opportunity to improve the lives of people around them. We often walk away with a sense of guilt if it doesn't make other people's lives better, which is unique and something that makes this planning process a lot more rich. We get to help make sure that that doesn't happen by converting those responsibilities that we carry into success criteria and helping women set themselves up for success going into the succession plan. Tiffany, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Brooklyn. And I think I want to go back to the title of this webinar, Protecting Your Legacy. And when I think about the women we serve in succession planning, I want to say some words that a client shared with me today. So this is not my quote, but succession is more than a sale. And that resonates with women and our clients, that when we're talking about succession planning, we're not just talking about maximizing the value of your firm, which is an integral part, of having a thriving firm. And it's something that we do talk about and we do put into the plan. But when we're talking about succession or sustainability, the way that we view it is maximizing the legacy. And so when I think about why is this different for women and how values play a role in that and how client relationships play a role in it, is that is what succession actually is. It's not a sale of your firm. It's not just a one-time transaction. It is an intentional plan to transition relationships. What baton are you passing? And so creating a plan that considers that and has your values forefront and intentional is integral to be able to come out the other side really proud of your transition. And that's the way we measure success, is that are you proud about the transition that happens? And what do you define as legacy as a firm owner? Being able to put language to that is going to help you find that values alignment if you're looking for a successor or you're looking for another firm to partner with or a platform. Taking that step to put words to what is your legacy, what parts, like what Bridget, what you were sharing, when you launched your firm and the way that you serve clients, there's a method and there's a philosophy and there's a care that you bring to the work that you do, why you do it that way. And so putting words to that and identifying what is it, the baton that you're passing, what is succession to you, and what are those non-negotiables versus, your wants. Those are the types of conversations we have with women when we're succession planning. It's so much more than just deal terms and structuring it out that way. It's maximizing your legacy.
I love that. That is so well said. And I think really important. And I think a lot of the women that are on this call today that will hit home for them. And it's nice to know that there's firms like all of yours that are supporting this and recognizing that as a really important characteristic when evaluating whether it's a partner, a transition, a sale, or a successor. Um, so, Stuart, we're going to bring you into the equation now at FP Transitions. You're working on hundreds of succession slash sustainability plans every year. What are some of the most common mistakes that you see firms make when it comes to succession planning, and what advice do you have for those that are on the call today?
Suzanne, thanks for the question. It really echoes a lot of what's already been said here today, but I think the first mistake is waiting too long. Secondly, is about not having a clear vision about what you want the future to be for both the individual as an advisor and for the business. And then third, sort of a lack of flexibility. So if we start with the first one, waiting too long, I always go back to the simple fact that everybody is going to leave their role at some point in time, but we don't know when that's going to happen. We don't know the circumstances for it, so we want to plan for as many of those contingencies as we can. And then that fits into the next piece is about having a clear vision. And it's not just a vision for the business, but it's a co-vision between the individual's wants and needs and desires and that of the business. I find a lot of our clients let the business drive their personal decisions, and they have a really difficult time in separating the two of them and putting themselves first. I always start out a relationship with asking a client, when do you want to retire? Do you have a retirement date in mind? And there's a kind of a stark difference I find between how women and men approach this. Men oftentimes will say, yeah, I'm going to retire at 65, but then we get to the age of 64, 63, and then it's 70. And again, then it's 75. It's just sort of this rolling retirement date. And they're waiting for some event to happen that they can't describe before they can put a real solid plan in place. Some men, but I find most women take a much more pragmatic approach to this, and that they look at both the personal and the business pieces of it together, and they can plan to exit the business for personal reasons at a particular point in time, and they tend to stick with it, which makes planning a whole lot easier and more productive and more successful because you've got a specific goal in mind. And so when you're looking at the future and trying to define what that looks like, it's not just, how big do you want the business to be, but then, if the business is going to grow from where you are today to, today times X, then how many people do you need to fill that in? How many years is it going to take you to get there? And what's going to happen if you don't get there in the meantime? And the reason I bring that up is that planning can be different depending upon the size of the firm. That the sole practitioner's options are fairly limited, and not in a negative way, but if you don't have a next generation successor within your organization who you believe is going to be able to take over and succeed, you need to look to the outside. And there's been discussion about, do you need to look for another female advisor to take over, or look for a larger firm to take over? And there's the short-term goal of making sure that if something happens that's unplanned, that there's another firm or individual that you have vetted that has similar values and goals and style and resources and products that you do, who can either you have an agreement with that they're going to buy your firm if something happens that you can't continue, or they're going to just step in as what we call a guardian of your firm and take care of your clients and your staff in the short term and help your firm to be sold. So that there's different ways of approaching it. As a firm gets bigger, then the decision becomes, what do I want to leave behind? Is it going to be a firm that stands alone and remains independent? Or is my goal to maximize my dollar return? And if that's the goal, then selling the firm is what's going to happen, because that's where most of the money is. If the goal is to remain independent, then you got to have an inside track to be able to do that. And that takes the people that have the skill and the ability and the appetite for risk to take on the debt that it's going to take over that firm. One of the things that was said early on in this conversation was that succession planning is really about sustainability. And I've always defined sustainability as getting to the point where if something happens to anybody in the organization, it's not just the owner, that the firm can continue. That you've got the people in place, you've got the plans in place, that you know what's going to happen, that there aren't too many unplanned surprises, and that the big unplanned surprises you have planned outcomes for, so that there is continuation of the firm. And then flexibility. You never know what's going to happen individually. You don't know what's going to happen with the industry, with the regulatory environments, with your clients. And so you've got to revisit these plans from time to time, at least every 2 years. So when we help a client to put together what we call a continuity plan, which is typically with a third party, we'll normally just write them for 2 years, so that the parties are forced to revisit it over that period of time and come back and make sure it's still realistic and the parties are the correct ones that you want to have in place. This is a subject we can talk about for hours, but Suzanne, I know you have more you want to cover.
No, it's very that was really, really helpful. And I would imagine that just the process of engaging with you guys for someone to be thinking and know what questions to ask and to have some of this written down and creating the roadmap is just it's got to make that individual, that woman, feel so much better to know that she's even starting on this path or this journey.
Yeah, very much so.
So great. Well, thank you for that. So Brooklyn and Tiffany, what are the first steps or areas of consideration that you recommend for female advisors as they start this succession or sustainability planning process?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Suzanne. I'll start us off by just referencing what I had said a minute ago about how we start with figuring out what your values are and how you feel about the succession plan as being a good place to start. But to be honest, we do holistic succession planning, which involves the business and the personal side of all this. And we do that with everyone, men and women. So to take you a step further, I want to compare two stories of working with a male and then working with a female advisor. And I'll start with the male advisor. We started working with him. He was excited, kind of happy-go-lucky, the firm is worth something. We're going to get this done. I have good people on my team. We just need a plan in place and confident and feeling good. And after we do this with everyone, we always say, hey, there's this personal side to the succession plan, and you are worth more than who you are in the business or who you are to your clients. There's more to you than that. And we always recommend or mention in the beginning, at some point, it might be a good idea to loop in your spouse or life partner or whoever that may be into the conversation, because we never see ourselves objectively. And eventually, this male advisor was comfortable enough to add his wife onto one of our calls. And the difference in how he sees himself is like night and day. And hearing his wife talk about how much she wanted him to be present in their lives because she had already retired, and there was so much that she wanted them to accomplish together. And it didn't have to be fully retired. It could be just scaling back hours, right? She's not asking for the moon. She's just asking to be heard. And at the same time, I'm going to tell the story of his successor. So there was a woman who wanted to buy him out. And when she started working with us, we were thinking, well, does she even want to buy the business? We don't know, not feeling super confident in it. If she did, she'd probably want to have a partner. And after about 12 months of working with her perspective of herself had completely changed. The entire time, we were encouraging the man to see the other people in the deal and see the value of the relationships, not just the value of the business. And we're encouraging the female to see the value that she brings to the table. It's not that we're telling her to downplay the other relationships and the other qualitative factors, but we're saying we want to help empower you to approach this seeing what you're worth and able to negotiate not just the money side of it, which of course is important, but also for those qualifiable things that you want that are hard to quantify. When you can understand as a woman what value you bring to the table and why your voice is important, then you're able to articulate it. And men often do that already naturally coming to us. We're helping them with all the other things, advocate for the other people in your life. For women, we're helping them advocate for themselves and what they believe is important. It's just different. So I think what I wish someone had told me as a woman starting out, which makes a difference in your career and in the succession plan. So twofer. Is understand your worth and be able to believe in the value that you bring. So that's kind of what I think starts when you're setting up the mindset of like, okay, I'm going to approach this succession plan. I need to understand who I am and what I want and what's important to me, be able to articulate those things. As a woman, the advice would be different for a man.
I think that's such a great bit of advice. There's so many women, senior women that I've known in my career that just still struggle with that. It's kind of bizarre, right? And it's a psychological difference between, there's some men that look are subpar and they think they're great, right? Now it's, we're generalizing here, but I think that's really, really great advice. Tiffany, what about you? You're an exit planner. You work on all the nitty-gritty details, right? So what advice do you have on how if there's a female advisor on this call and she's ready to do it, she's ready to roll up her sleeves, where does she start?
Yeah, I love this question. And first, I want to point out what Stuart said. What I heard, Stuart, is that women are better at succession planning than men. That's my takeaway from this webinar. What you said, and just trying to be funny there. But from the aspect to answer your question, Suzanne, about what can you do, the women who are listening to this today, I know this will most likely resonate with you when we're talking about succession planning. And to what Brooklyn said, is that we're not talking about a one-time event. And I know you probably know this, but I want to remind you of that. And so, really, the three legs of the stool to be thinking about, if this is our succession planning chair, and the three legs to be thinking about is your personal readiness. So, that is going to help drive your sustainability for your firm and your succession plan for your firm, is thinking about not just a business transition. This is as much as a life transition, and it's going to be gradual and over time. Or in like the example, that Katie gave, your story just really like touched my heart. Like there are unexpected things that could happen. And so when we're thinking about, how that impacts your life, that needs to be a part of your succession plan, is thinking about your identity, your purpose, integrating what does your impact look like outside of just the role that you have in your firm, and how is that going to transition alongside your business changing. And then thinking about the business readiness. So we have the personal, we have the business. So that's when we get into the nitty gritty, when we're coaching advisors on this, and we create a roadmap and we talk about the business. How do we get the business functioning to where you're not the one wearing all the hats, which women are really good at doing? We have spaghetti brains and we're just great at juggling all the things, or even if we're not great at it, somehow we just end up doing it anyways. So figuring out how can we make this succession plan a mindset, like Brooklyn said, of instead of just thinking of it as ownership, thinking of it as stewardship. I'm stewarding these relationships. I'm stewarding this business. How can I expand that to where it's not just relying on me? What processes do I need to have in place? That comes back to even making your firm more valuable in the future than it is today. And so expanding that mindset of adopting a succession mindset brings even more value to your firm. And then the third leg is that exit planning part that you don't probably know today, as in the education around your options. Because there's a lot of different ways that you can structure a succession plan, whether it's internal or external, or doing a merger, or finding a platform that you want to join that has these resources. There's so many options, and you can feel really overwhelmed. And that would be my caution on the how to get started. Don't start with the how, because you will get really overwhelmed. Start with the why. Start with your vision. Start with, what is my legacy? We have a great toolkit that Suzanne, I'm sure you're going to talk about, that pulls some questions and some considerations that you should have for these three different stools, three different legs of the chair that I talked about, with personal, business, and exit. But if you start with the why of what is the baton that I'm passing, and what is really important to me, and what is my vision, the how you can get resources for, the how you can get consulting for, but and you can gain that knowledge, and it becomes a lot easier. But it's really hard to make progress if you start there, because you'll just be overwhelmed. So I would start with what's foundational. And if you walk away today, just walk away with a commitment of, I'm going to adopt a succession mindset, that I'm in this as a process, and I'm not just planning for a one-time transaction or event. I understand that this is going to be a process and a phase of my life and my business, and I'm committed to that process, and start with that foundational why.
Yeah, that is such great advice. And yes, at the end of this webinar, we have a QR code that is like the best succession toolkit I've ever seen. And it has resources from all three of these firms that are represented today. And I love that, personal readiness survey. I think starting there is really important with that why. And Stuart, what about you? What's your bit of advice on how somebody should get started? You deal in a very specific actual planning and plans with lots of clients. So what would be like the first thing you would have someone do?
So this has been a really interesting discussion, and in getting to know Brooklyn and Tiffany over the last month or so as we plan for this, our businesses are very complementary. At key. We approach succession planning initially from the business aspect, the financial piece of it, the structural piece of it, but it always goes back to the personal side because that's what really matters to actually get anything done. So we become psychologists or psychiatrists who have absolutely no training in that, but we spend a lot of time, discussing the personal aspects of this. So as been said before, it's starting early. It's understanding that succession planning isn't just a single discrete thing that you put in a plan in place, you put it in the drawer, and you forget about it. But ultimately, because it is so important, it covers so many different aspects of the business. It's really a core function of running a business. It goes into most of the major decisions that are made as a business owner. Who do you hire? When do you hire them? What do you teach them to do? Do you have people who are cross-trained to take over your functions so you don't have to do everything? What is your community of people in the industry? Do you have a group of peers that you regularly communicate with that are your trusted advisors? Again, it's just don't wait to start. You don't have to finish everything today, but you need to start thinking about it, and you need to start planning at least for the contingency sides of it today.
Yeah, well, if those that are on are already that you took step one, right? They say,
Exactly.
what do they say in the Peloton workout? Check, you're here. So the first part of the workout is the hardest part. You've showed up. So you showed up to this webinar to learn more about it. So it sounds like, this would be a step one. So thank you all for this great information. Bridget and Katie, a succession planning solution was the number one thing you're being asked about from your members of the Equita FN community. And you recently launched the Equita FN Succession Advantage and are partnering with Elevate and FP Transitions. Can you tell us a little bit about that offering and how it's being received by your member firms and others? Also, one of the questions that came in was, do you have to be a member of the Equita FN network in order to access the succession offering?
I'll start off. My voice holds out here. So thanks for that, Suzanne. So the Succession Advantage program, we just formally launched a few months ago, but as I'm sure Bridget will share in a little bit too, we have talked about this for years and spoken to different networks, different women and men in our industry to figure out what's out there and what's missing for our members specifically. So what I think the most important things was we realized that not one size fits all. Most of our members on our platform, and if you get to know Bridget and I, you will learn that we are fiercely independent. So we have some different needs, as Stuart and Tiffany and Brooklyn have talked about, where some of us or most of us are solopreneurs. So we have some different needs when it comes time for us to plan for these next steps for our businesses. So what we heard that women wanted was curated support and resources for every stage of this transition. So that's why we have our great team here. Tailored succession planning, because their journey is unique. We all know that. Again, doesn't fit in a box. We're all unique. We all want a different plan. We all have a different vision for our firm, and a solid path to protect and maintain the value of our business. Of course, that's what we're all looking for in the next stage of our firm. And Bridget, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so this is a topic that, we're rabid about. I mean, no kidding, we've been looking for years for the template, right? And after countless conversations with our peers, we're like, what's your plan? We couldn't get our head around, like, it's a multiple, right? It never resonated with us. It's not just this number that you're going to get paid for based on, the valuation of your company. It never sat right with us, with me personally. And then you read those failure statistics and you're like, how do you come up with a plan that feels right, that is successful? And so it was conversation after conversation with other people who were doing it a different way, or, a way that we felt sounded like it would work for me, right? It would work for my firm as a woman founder. And we really landed on there is no template, there is no one size fits all. Every woman I know, every person I know with a firm has a different vision for their firm, totally different. My dad, 88, still runs a company. So my vision is different than anybody else's is going to be, right? I actually don't want to exit, but I can't do this forever. So, you think about, well, how do you come up with a solution? What is the solution? And so after many conversations with Tiffany and Brooklyn, we were like, wow, we love the idea that it's different for every single woman. And when we're talking about succession planning, sustainability for women-led firms, it's because we go back to some of those things that we've found that that really resonates with us. It's that client part that is really important to us. It's our legacy, it's our identity. And when we finally learned about, hey, we can do this differently, there is this really holistic conversation and plan that every one of us can be having that will help us identify our own succession plan, our own solution. And like Stuart said, this is over time. This is, you start now. So we really listened to ourselves. We talked to a million peers and we landed on it's different for everybody. So how do you help this succeed for every founder, every woman founder? And you'll notice that none of our conversation was about here's the multiple, right? Because what we find is that, of course, it's base case that we want to get paid for our firms. Of course we do, right? But that's not driving our plan. That's going to happen and it's going to be more successful because we're going to have these plans, because we're going to have these next gen people, or, we will have a thoughtful plan of how we execute this. And my plan is going to look different from Katie's plan. So, it was just really, we learned so much over these years. And anyone listening to this, I would just say, take away, like, what is your vision and find a solution for that based on what your vision is, like Tiffany said, for yourself and for your business. Because it is deeper. And I think it's going to be different for all of us. So to have a plan in place where you have this, and then you have this execution, right? Like Stuart, you have this evaluation that is based on this great transition, and it will be successful, and your clients will be thrilled, and you will be really fulfilled, and that's really what we put together. And it was just, it's really great to have this conversation because it's been years in the making. So, I would just say, for all of us founders, like just trying to have a plan that is unique to us is where we landed.
So
Answer the
that's
question.
great. Yeah.
Sorry, you want me to answer the question about this offering is for Equita Financial Network members currently, but we are all for the advancement of women-led firms in this industry, all for the advancement of women. So would love to continue the conversation. And if you have additional questions, we'll have some great tools, because we really do hope that this conversation just spurs these actions and spurs the inspiration for you to start with on the planning.
I think that's great. I think you're saying, give us a call and let's figure out what we can do, right? So Brooklyn and Tiffany, we have about 5 minutes left. Could you just quickly give us a snapshot of what your role in this succession planning offering is? And then Stuart, same question for you.
Yeah, Tiffany, you want to take the lead on this one?
Yes. I am so excited about this. It just resonates so much with Brooklyn and I and our passion. So the role that we play with succession planning with the solution with the Equitom members is we partner with advisors and we do what's called a transition roadmap. So much like when you're doing a financial plan with a client for the first time, we want to spend a really good amount of time understanding your goals, understanding the unique aspects of your firm, understanding your timeline. And we don't expect you to have all the answers. But in our transition roadmap, which is in the toolkit, so you'll see some of the calls, there's 4 anchor calls. If you have any like key team members, if you've identified a successor, if you haven't, it really is for any advisor at any stage. We have advisors who are 20 years out from even thinking about, possibly exiting. So it really is about adopting that mindset. So we go through these key meetings gather that data, and then you come out of that time together with an implementation plan. And we pull from the different aspects of readiness that we talked about, the personal action items that you should be taking, the business action items, and getting your business sustainable, whether that's going to be in an emergency situation or a longer term planned transition. And then also education around what are your options and what would be the best to support your vision. And so from there, we continue coaching calls as needed to help implement that. And it really depends on where you are in the phase. And if you're ready to move forward with the legal side, then we hand off the baton to FP Transition. So Stuart, you could talk to that part.
Thanks, Tiffany. So I think we do the easy part. The hard part of all of this is finding the right successor that you're comfortable dealing with. And that's where what Katie and Bridget are building can help you to provide it. They're building that successor network. So once you've found the appropriate successor, we do valuation work. We do over 1,000 a year. We can help to put together the structure of the deal because there's all kinds of different ways of doing that, including finding financing if that's necessary, and doing all the documentation to make sure it's done properly and coordinating it to make sure it's all completed. And so we do kind of all the background work that's necessary to get it done. And if there isn't a successor that you found, we can also help to find that as well if it's needed.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds like a complete offering there, and kudos to you all for starting that. I know we're right at the tail end, and we've had a couple questions that we've asked throughout. So I'm going to move over to our closing takeaways. So I asked each of the panelists to prepare what's the one thing that you want those listening to take away from today's conversation. So Bridget, let's start with you on this one.
Yep. So thanks. And, like I mentioned earlier, do your due diligence. So one of the things that I think is really important when I'm talking to other women founders about like, hey, what's your plan? And who have you been talking to about your succession plan? I think it's really important to do due diligence because if you're looking to sell to, your successor is a large company and you're a solopreneur, you want to be really sure that that's a fit for you and your clients. So like Katie said, Equita is really independent. There's a lot of independent choices out there, but if it's important for you that you maintain a degree of, or your firm continues as an independent entity, you're going to want to find a successor that fits that, right? You're not going to necessarily want to roll your firm where you become a W-2 employee, for example. So there's a lot of different solutions out there. I would say do the due diligence on what your vision is for your firm, for that legacy. Ask the right questions, make sure that that's aligned with whatever you want.
Great. Katie, how about you?
So as we've heard from everyone, it's never too early to start planning. I think Stuart and I have the same concept here, but again, if I can share anything with what's happened to me in my story is put the plan in place before life forces you to make the plan. I think we convey that to all of our clients. So let's take our own advice.
Sure. Stuart?
Yeah, and as Katie said, don't wait. You don't have to have all the answers now, but it's important to start working on a plan and at least getting a contingency plan in place now if you don't have one already.
And also, like if you think, Stuart, about like many of the people that are on this call are fiduciaries, and that's kind of a fiduciary responsibility to your client, right? Is to have this plan. Brooklyn?
Yeah. So this just sounds very much like something I would say being an Enneagram 4. You have to know what you want. You have to know who you are first. It's astonishing how if you do that, the plan becomes much more simpler and clearer to execute. So I think there's the soul searching that can take a lot of time in the beginning.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Great. And Tiffany, you get the last line. What's your last takeaway?
Oh, I feel so special. Well, my background before, coming into this industry was I was in the therapy field for a long time. And so my takeaway for you is that a succession plan is more than just about the business. And don't forget that. And it's just as much a major life transition. So if you start implementing and making micro actions to design a next chapter that you're excited about, it's not about leaving your business. It's about giving you flexibility and freedom to be able to change with the maturing of your business. And that could include your role changing and will. And so designing that and thinking about that alongside what is happening with the business is going to fuel and have a synergy effect. And those are the most successful and smooth transitions that we see. It will turn into something exciting, designing that next chapter.
Wonderful. Well, we are right on time. That was perfect timing. We couldn't have planned that if we wanted to. Um, Thank you all. Great information. Thank you for all of the attendees. Listen, here's all the ways that you can contact Tiffany in Brooklyn, Bridget and Katie and Stuart. Use this QR code. It is a great toolkit. Talks about that transition roadmaps, most frequently asked questions in succession planning, and the 12 essential questions on designing your perfect succession. We will send out the recording. We will, so that you can share or re-listen. We will send out the slides. Don't worry. And, again, we really appreciate your interest and good luck with the next chapter in your sustainability planning. And thank you to Equita FN for hosting.
Thanks, Suzanne. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
I'll go ahead and I'm just going to leave this up a couple more seconds so everyone has a chance to scan. It was a pleasure having all of our panelists.